What up, guys? The offensive madman Kyle Robinson coming to you today with the final installment in the Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning playthrough, the review. We have effectively spent 11 sessions playing this game. The last few cut down in video form to 30 or so minutes. But lots of time spent in-game playing, so we're going to sit down today and basically pull a review. For those of you who may have stumbled across this, just curious as to what Kingdoms of Amalur may be, it is the only game ever produced by 38 Studios, a company that was founded by former baseball player Curt Schilling. He wanted to start an MMO RPG, and essentially that went from that idea to this. It was released a decade ago on the 360 and the PS3, and the game itself, while I'm playing the remastered edition, if you will, what we're going to do today is we're going to break down the pros and cons of Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, and then finally drop a final score, visuals, gameplay, and then a final score and the story. Those are the three focal points of this review. Let's start with the pros for Kingdoms of Amalur. Even as old as it was, now again, mind you, I'm playing the remastered version that was re-released in 2018 for the PS4, but the game itself is pretty. It looks good. It plays smooth. For what it was decent. You know, it was deep. It had a lot of systems in it that games really hadn't featured up at that point. Skyrim was really the first one to really get deep with some of its abilities and things of that nature. And then the crafting system and the apothecary system that this game has in place are good ideas, but they're not really focused upon the way that maybe they should be, and we'll talk a little more about that here in the later part of this review. The other thing that I'd say is really good about this game is that visually it looks good. It does. It looks good. Even for a game as old as it is, a remaster, you could tell for the most part where some of that stuff would hold up. And visually, it looks stunning for a game as old as it is. And I remember playing the original one back on PS3, and it does, that part holds well to even today's standards, so that's nice. Those three things, the visual scenery, the deepness for the age of the game, and then a pretty diverse RPG tree. Let's take a look at this RPG tree real quick. I pulled it up a second ago, but let's take a look at it here. It's a fairly deep RPG tree that really lends itself, supposedly, and we'll get more into that in a minute, but it lends itself to wanting you to level up. So realistically, the game had elements that looked like it would be good to go in terms of an RPG, but when you dig a little deeper into this game, you stumble upon the cons. And the biggest con for me still is the travel system, and it is fundamentally fucked up and super depressing because the travel system does what a lot of RPGs do, and that is they want you to unlock a fast travel point before you can fast travel. Perfectly fine, other than the fact that the missions in the main story, which is where I spent a good bulk of my 20 hours of gameplay, realistically just all it was running. Fuck, it might as well have been called Walking Simulator, because that's essentially all I did. I did some fighting for little groups, very similar to this, because you would just run across small groups of enemies as you would be running along down the roads and stuff. But realistically, you would walk from point A to point B. If you hadn't watched it, look at this. Let me show you exactly one of the things I'm talking about. The last mission took place in here. Okay, that's where it started. I started that mission back here. Now, the thing about that is, it took me almost an hour and a half just to walk that section. Just that section, an hour and a half. And I'm okay with some walking. Make me explore the scenery and the system and all that. I get it. I'm fine with that. But for as long as the walks were and as much walking as they made you do, you really should have had a mount. It didn't have to be anything like super pristine, but the fact that you should have had a horse or a fucking warhog or something to run around on to at least make that walk just a tad bit more bearable would have been nice. The next thing is the writing of this game. The game was written and backed by famed author R.A. Salvatore, famous for his D&D books. I had hoped that the writing wouldn't get lost in translation, but it did. And while the game had some neat twists and turns and cool points to it, at the same time, it didn't. Like it had points that just didn't have a payoff in the writing, and it should have. Some of the side stories that I did, the very few of them that I did, were better scripted and better confined, if it were. But the main story, it was all over the place. No pun intended. And that's not necessarily a good thing for an RPG. Just my 2 cents. The next thing is the quest themselves for the main story. A lot of it, as you progressed, ended up getting super repetitive. Run and go and run and go and run and go and run or go. And that, I was told that was going to happen, and I kind of half-ass expected it to happen. And that's fine. I get it. Not mad about it. But that being said, I had hoped against hope that it wouldn't be that way, but that's essentially what it was. And even though I kind of understand it, it's frustrating for a game that was as deep as this is to just essentially resort to quest, run, beat up, run, beat up, run, beat up kind of thing. And it did take away a little bit, especially toward the end. The last thing that really kind of, I won't say frustrated me is the right word. So you're watching me right now play through this game, and I have completed the main story of Kingdoms of Amalur. Now look at this. I am level 22. The gear that I pick up still is only level 12. I'm sorry, level 12. So a full 10 levels under me. So what that tells me is that the gear was not designed for, essentially, like the leveling system was not designed with gear in mind. It was designed with the tree, and that's fine. But when half of the system is broken and you can't actively use, like all you have is like the gear is not comparable to shit further in the game. And the game just essentially doesn't give you a reason to pick shit up other than to sell it, which in and of itself is a problem because I have 490,000 gold, which is great. But what the fuck do I spend it on? Literally fucking nothing. So those are things that are fundamentally broke within the game, in my personal opinion. So let's jump into some final thoughts here, as I feel like I've beat this game up enough, hindsight. The gameplay isn't bad. It really isn't. It's very easy. And for what it was, not terrible, not genre defining for an action RPG, but not terrible. The coolest part about the combat system is the fate meter, which you saw a little bit ago, where I essentially turn into a god and can rip souls out of people for extra XP, which is neat. That's a cool concept, but that's really the only thing that this game brings to the table in the way of new gameplay improvements. I'll tell you now, there was a new DLC drop for this game, which was one of the reasons I think it was given for free to PlayStation Plus subscribers. And I'm okay with that. I'm down for that. Promote it, all that. I won't be buying the DLC. I have no urge to play anymore in this game or in this system. I don't at all. And that's shitty. It really is, because I think the developers deserved more than they got for the way that this worked. It had its perks and its pros, but it didn't really hit the right spot for me. The game didn't age well. You can't play, like, you could play hundreds probably of RPGs, even by indie creators at this point, that in my opinion are better than this game was. Let's go ahead and divvy out final scores for Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning. We'll break it down into graphics, gameplay, and story. The graphics side of this is by far the highest score, and we're going 8 out of 10. The next score we're going to jump into is the story, which we've already heard my bitches about the story and my anger with the story and the way that it progresses. So that is no doubt only a 3 out of 10. And then finally, we're going to look at the gameplay. The gameplay is super easy, pick up and play, action RPG, not a hard game to learn. So I got to at least give the gameplay elements of that, which tells me that it's going to be a 4 out of 10. In overall final score in this game, I wouldn't go more than 5. I wouldn't. 5 is as far up the food chain as I'm willing to go, because it's just, this game isn't good anymore. Like I said, there are hundreds probably at this point RPGs that you could pick up and play that are way better than this game, and this is my personal opinion. So let's put a price tag on it, shall we? Because that is kind of the whole name of the game when it comes to the way I do this. I got this game for free, which is good, because otherwise I'd probably be pissed. But if you have the option and you're like, man, he's probably full of shit, I want to try it, blah, 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 and I respect that. That's your prerogative. I would not spend more than $20 on this game. A, it's a decade old. B, even though it got new DLC, the DLC wasn't needed. So it might add a few more story elements to it, but the game just doesn't keep you invested. So I personally wouldn't spend more than $20 on the game. So if you go out of your way to play this game, I by all means, give it a shot. If you don't trust me, I don't recommend it, but you do you, boo-boo. I'm happy to get through this, because I'm hoping that the next game gives me a little more to sink my teeth into for what it is, and that's just a personal hope. The poll for that is up at time of recording, or it isn't up at time of recording, but by the time you see this, it will be up. So if you haven't done so, check in with the Coalition of Madmen on Discord. That is going to be the easiest way to vote in that poll still. There's going to be some options on the table for the next Saturday RPG that we play, and you can kind of determine the fate of the next game that we dive into on Saturdays. We'll probably maintain this half-hour, 45-minute long format and try to knock some of the extra shit out of the way when we are paused, like we did with this game, just because it does. This format definitely lends itself to an RPG format much better. So that's the idea. I hope you guys have enjoyed Kingdoms of Amalur. I have enjoyed bringing it to you. I've learned from this experience. I have learned what I don't like in a game more so than I did previously. I've learned what I like in an RPG as well. So those are my final thoughts on Kingdoms of Amalur. I am glad that it is behind me, if I'm being brutally honest. This has been the game that I have given the least reputable review to so far. And that's saying something, because I've played some pretty fucking shitty games in my lifetime. So of all the ones I've done a review on, this has by far gotten the worst. But it's only up from here. We have the choices. We're going to continue. So I want to say thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to join us next Saturday when we roll out the next game in the Saturday Let's Play lineup. We also have the Let's Plays Monday through Friday at noon o'clock. So all that's there. If you haven't done so, please give a follow to us on Facebook, a subscribe on YouTube. I am well on my way to breaking my own goals for the year, all fucking ready, which is nifty. And then last but not least, there is the Discord I mentioned previously, Coalition of Madmen. All of those links are in the description above. All you got to do is click on the link tree. It'll take you to where you need to go. We would love to have you in any of those places to interact, hang out, conversate, and just carry on the general debauchery with us. So, in the meantime and in between time, I am the Offensive Madman, reminding you once again that if words offend you, you can fuck off.